Good Sabbath. Thanks for joining us. And usually takes about 30 seconds for the broadcast to catch up so I can share it around. So I'm going to let Miranda do her opening entertainment while I get things situated here.
Okay, well, you know what? I don't think we have a picture of this. But, this last week, a friend of mine sent me a text of an old garden beds that she moved out a year ago, and while we were living there, she got a couple of morning glory plants for me, and she put them in a pot, and she tried to train them up this little trellis-looking thing, and they just didn't do very well. I think it was too crowded, and maybe not enough sun, and so. Now here it was 3 years later since I had given those to her, and I remember thinking it was at the end of the first season that, oh, she's not going to end up with any seeds because morning glories just reseed themselves and such, and next thing you know, you have so many it's like weeds. But I thought she's not going to get any at all. Well, turns out here 3 years after that, after she moved out all of her pots and everything, when she moved out of that apartment complex, that nobody else had planted anything there either, but the morning glories had just taken over the entire plot, and they were also climbing up the thing that she had worked so hard for that little plant to climb up, and it never did very much. And I just thought, you know what, because we've talked about the sower and planting seeds and getting the increase and such like that. And sometimes maybe we've planted some seeds and we just cannot see any results from that. But later on, when we're not even there to see it, all of a sudden it just explodes into growth. And so when she sent me that text, I thought it was really cool.
Oh, perfect timing. I just got done. So today, if if you haven't seen the Barbie movie, you might want to go see that before you watch the rest of this, because we might have some spoilers for you. But we actually went and saw the Barbie movie almost a week ago. Mm-hmm. Tomorrow will be a week ago. And thus wearing pink today. This was the shirt I wore to the Barbie movie. And if you go to the Barbie movie, you need to wear some sort of pink, or at least maybe the striped shirt that the Alan Barbie doll wears. So, make sure you dress appropriately. But we all went, which was sort of an event.
It was an event, particularly for our family, because I don't think as a family have ever gone to a movie together. Oh wait, once last year, some friends of ours invited us to see, was it Christmas Bells or something like that with Henry Wadsworth Longfellow? Was that
Yeah,
right?
It was about the...
Yeah.
It was put on by they normally do plays, but they made a movie. They're in Branson and somewhere else. I forget what they're called. Yeah.
Anyways, I hadn't been to see a movie in years, but the reason why, is because I always say that the theater is too cold and the movie is too loud and there's too many people. Well, I was reading some news and I saw that someone was making spiritual analogies and allegories to the Barbie movie, and it just hit me like, hey, I want to do that. And so I walked into the bedroom where Brett was busy working away at his computer, and I said, hey, let's go see the Barbie movie. And Brett must have just about fallen over, but he acted as if it was as normal as any other day, any other moment, and set about looking that up.
Yep. A little bit of a shock. We hadn't really done that, and it wasn't too crowded. We went Sunday morning.
It's true.
10:40 or so.
It's true. I could not complain that there were too many people. No.
Still was cold.
It was still cold. It was still too loud, but there were not too many people.
But so we saw the Barbie movie, and so we're gonna use it to do some comparative allegories here, but before we get into that, we're gonna do a couple fun things here. giving you some fun, interesting facts about Barbie. So yeah, here we go. This is Barbie and the Gentiles, because in Sabbath school we're covering Ephesians chapter 3, and so we thought that would be
right. And Brett was teaching the Sabbath school lesson today, so this is why I was like,
why I
hey,
have a
you know what?
slideshow.
We already have the stuff. Let's just do it.
So if you didn't know, some fun, interesting facts about Barbie, that the makers, actually Mattel, the company that makes Barbie and all these other toys, Mattel was started in a garage by a couple, mostly the wife, and their first big toy, I think, was the burp gun. And that made them all kinds of money. But anyway, they started traveling around, and they were in Switzerland once, and she ran across this doll they had over there. Because in America, all the dolls were little baby dolls. They were, just babies, and little girls took care of babies. And so over there in Switzerland, she found this doll, and it was not a baby doll. It was this. It was called Lily, or Build Lily. And it was originally a gag gift usually given out at bachelor parties, and they had little cartoons that went along with it that I didn't include because they're a little shady. But it was that kind of a doll. It wasn't meant for girls to play with. It was given out as this gag gift to men at bachelor parties. But that's the doll she found, and just for comparison, that's the very first Barbie doll. So you can see really how similar they actually are. So similar, in fact, that when Barbie came out and was such a big hit, the makers of Lily sued Mattel because, it was pretty obvious, how, she got her ideas from. And because she actually bought like 25 of the Lily dolls, took them home, and then used those as her model. And so she did like any good American, and she bought the company that made the Lily doll and put them out of business. So anyway, that's the inspiration for Barbie and where she came from. And if you have one of these original Barbies, the first ones, they're worth lots of money right now. Couple things. So I'm just going to show you some of the Barbies that didn't make it over the years. In the movie, there's tons of Barbies that were canceled or discontinued, and they're in the movie. And this is one of them, the Growing Up Skipper and Growing Up Ginger. So these were two that they came out with, and if you can read it, she's two dolls in one for twice as much fun. And then Growing Up Ginger, she's cute little girl, and then tall, curvy teenager. And the idea was if you twisted her arm or rotated her arm, the dimensions of the doll would change, and she would go from cute little girl to tall, curvy teenager. And it was just a little bit too weird for the American public, so Growing Up Skipper did not last that long. And if you have one of those, they're worth a little bit of money as well. Random fact, Skipper actually started out as an 8-year-old in her first release, and then they aged her to 14 years old because she's Barbie's younger sister. Pregnant Midge, she was one that came out and didn't last a whole long time. Actually, the first version of her didn't do so bad. It was just she was a pregnant Barbie, but the parents felt like it was promoting teenage pregnancy, so they gave her a family. They gave her a husband whose name was Alan, and a little boy. I think the boy's name was Tommy. But in the second version, once you had the family, somebody had a really bad idea, and they made the pregnant Midge, they made her stomach so it would open, and inside was a little baby doll, and you could take the baby in and out. And yeah, that was just too bizarre for people, so Pregnant Midge got discontinued. Wheelchair Barbie was one that came out to originally great fanfare because, kids who used wheelchairs, and so here's a Barbie they can relate to, Barbie wheelchair. Well, they could really relate to because for whatever reason they didn't think about wheelchair Barbie fitting into Barbie's dream house. So she actually wouldn't fit in the dream house. There was no ramp to get in, and there was no elevator or anything for her to get upstairs. So I guess they felt really relatable because they couldn't, the wheelchair users run into that kind of stuff all the time, and it really created waves with the ADA, and so wheelchair Barbie didn't last long. And there was Video Barbie, and she has a little camera in the front and a screen on her back, and this came out in the 90s when video was everywhere and everything. And this one actually didn't last long because the FBI was very concerned about how it might be used. So at the urging of the FBI, Mattel discontinued the Video Barbie. And this was another somebody in the PR department didn't do so well here. The computer programmer Barbie. So you see on the bottom left there, that's the actual doll. And it came with a little booklet and a little, comic book. And in the book, as she goes through the story, she's designing a game to teach girls how to program. That's the idea. But in the book, she actually passes on the coding skills to the guys. And at some point, she crashes her laptop and she gives it to the guys to fix. So, and you can see there, so it'll go faster if Brian and I help, offers Steven. Great, says Barbie. Steven, can you hook up Skipper's hard drive up to the library's computer? Sure, says Steven. The library computer has excellent security software to protect it. So that was a lie. And so she actually didn't do any of the programming, and she had the guys doing the programming and the coding, and then, oh no, I crashed my laptop. Boys, help me. And so it was really really bad marketing. So that one got canceled. And then, just so you know, it wasn't all just the girl dolls. Alan was Ken's friend, and he got canceled because no one wanted him. He was not popular at all. And I didn't notice it, but if you actually look at his face, the doll just has this kind of depressed look anyway. It's like, I'm Alan. I'm Ken's friend. That's all there is to me. So he's not a very happy doll. But what's interesting is that all of those dolls are actually in the movie. And there's more. I didn't include all the ones that were discontinued. There's more. But if you see the movie, all the Barbies are actually in the movie. It's even if they're just in the background, or they just get seen and not heard. All the canceled, discontinued Barbie dolls are in the movie as well, which I thought was kind of cool because they were including everybody, in the movie. So, which actually takes you to Ephesians. That's what we were talking about in chapter 3. Was the whole idea that Paul was talking about, the great mystery of the gospel, and the great mystery is that the Gentiles and the Jews are all one. And he was, the mystery that was hidden from ages. He comes in and he starts talking about, telling them, you are, co-heirs with the, Jewish people. You are equal to them. You are all together. And so, he's preaching the gospel to Gentiles, and actually this is what Miranda has.
Oh yeah, so basically in the Barbie movie, Barbie's life is perfect, right? And all the Barbies have jobs. All the Kens do not have jobs. Ken is an accessory. But we'll call Barbie the Jews and Ken the Gentiles. Mm-hmm. And Barbie, despite her perfection, has it all wrong. She is not better than Ken, and Ken does not know the truth that he is equal to Barbie.
Yeah. I mean, not to spoil the movie for you, but I mean, the whole beginning setup is that, and it's Barbie world, and all the Barbies have jobs, and they're all happy, and, everything's perfect. And it's really kind of interesting. It's kind of fun because, she gets up in the morning and it's, hi, Barbie, everybody. and they have the doll food and everything. Of course, there's nothing in it. She takes a cup and pretends like she drinks, and she's got plastic waffles and stuff. So it's all kind of there, but it's this plastic perfectionist world, right? And everything's perfect. And early on, you start getting the sense that when they bring the Kens are all the male dolls. There's Ken, but then all the male dolls are called Ken.
Right, just like all the Barbies are called Barbie.
Yeah, except for Alan. Alan's the only one called different, and no one wants Alan, but he's there as well. And anyway, so yeah, early on you start getting the idea that Ken doesn't get a lot of attention or respect or anything, and but all the Barbies are it.
Right, and at some point in time, Barbie goes to the real world. So does Ken. Ken comes back first. He learns, of course, about patriarchy.
So he gets to the real. I guess we're just going to ruin the movie for people.
Didn't mean to do that. I thought you were going to go with whatever else you had.
Well, we have to before we get to
some of this first. Okay.
So he gets to the real world, and he sees how in our world, men are really the powerful ones, and women are not. And that's news to him. That's like, guys here, they're the ones with the power. They're the ones with the respect. And so he goes back to Barbie world. Before Barbie does, he goes back to Barbie world and changes all so it becomes a male-dominated society instead of Barbie-dominated society.
Yeah. So, anyways, Barbie comes back and she gets together with the other Barbies, and they underhandedly take Barbie world back for the Barbies. And they at that point in time they do make some concessions. They can see where it really wasn't fair that Ken didn't have real jobs and stuff like that. And so in Barbie world now they talked about living out the truth of who you were. And yet it was imperfectly done because they did not have a clear understanding of what that actually meant. They could see a little bit, but not everything.
Right. And I thought it was interesting, and we're talking about allegories and parallels. I thought it was interesting that, when she gets in the real world, she does some of the same stuff she did in Barbie land, and she takes the mug and all of a sudden, she gets something in her face. Like, oh no, real living comes as a shock, and I don't know how you would say it. I mean, before everything was perfect, but plastic and not real. She gets to real life, and it's messy and hard, but it's real life.
Mm-hmm. Right. It's sort of like, though, here in the real world, there are equal rights laws for women, and they're written on paper. But that does not mean that they get written entirely on people's hearts. Because the old plastic ways of living, how we're used to living and stuff, our ideas of perfection are still there in our hearts. And so the laws on paper get lived out imperfectly because we can't really see them clearly.
Right. Which is what you're saying about they go back and make changes, but they're not, perfect. And it's not a perfect world anymore. They're trying, but yeah.
Yeah. So in the end of the movie, Barbie chooses to move from Barbie world into real world and become real.
Yeah.
It means giving up her old self entirely, and she accepts death, the reality of death, but it also changes her into a real person, in a sense, who she was meant to be.
Yeah.
And she's no longer living out plastic perfection, masquerading as the truth, because they thought that they were doing everything right and perfect, and had no idea that they weren't.
Yeah. But life was the same every single day. Everything happened the same. It was plastic. It wasn't real, but it was this, facade of perfection. And then when things got real, it got messy, but better. And she had to give up that plastic life to become real.
Right. And basically, when we start to live out the truth of who God created us to be, we can start to see the writing of who we are written on our hearts. The words of God giving us equal rights with his son Jesus. And equal rights lead to equal actions.
And that's what Ephesians chapter 3 was about, was the equal rights of the Gentiles to the Jews. And so I didn't bring a Bible with me, and I forgot to bring it up, but if you'd like, you can read Ephesians chapter 3. It's right after Ephesians chapter 2. And it's really a short chapter, and most of it is a prayer for the Gentiles. But in there, the two big things, as Paul talked about, he's been given the commission to share the mystery of God that was held from the ages but was revealed in Christ to the Gentiles. And that mystery is you are co-heirs with the Jews. And that's what you were saying. There was that, the truth comes out, and it's that, God's law is written in your heart. It's everybody, right? And in Sabbath school, we were talking about, well, that's interesting. What do you mean by the mystery? It was hidden from generations. Why was this, truth about salvation hidden? And we sort of got into that. All right, so we'll just go into that.
I'm done with my section.
I don't know. Why was the mystery hidden? I think that's the next. Oh, it is. All right. So we did a little game. I'm not sure how this is going to play on live video, but we did a little game in Sabbath school, because if I'm doing Sabbath school, we're going to play games. And it was, what is the picture? So I showed them this, and they had to guess, based on, what do you think this is a picture of? And if you can't guess what it is, then it's obviously an extreme close-up. Then I take it, and there's a little bit of a zoom out. And then we pull back, and now can you guess what it is? And if you don't get it on that one, we pull it back out a little bit more. And then by this point, I think one of them said it was an avocado. And it's like, yes, it's an avocado. It was actually one of the teenagers who was with us. She got it. It was funny because she said, it's an avocado. And they were like, oh. Yeah. So yeah, it was an avocado. And we did another one, which I thought was going to be a lot tougher, but apparently it wasn't. They got it pretty much almost right off. I think it was at this point they guessed it, and it's the inside of a cheese grater, which I split them into the men and the women, and I gave this to the men because I thought, wow, they'll never get this. But actually, the women got it on they knew what it was the very first picture, and I think the men got it on the second picture. But yeah, inside of a cheese grater. And then the last one was this. And anybody could answer, and it was kind of obvious right up. It was like, oh, it's some sort of collage, right? But what is the collage? What's it making a picture of? And so right there, you look at it, you pull back a little bit, and it's like, yeah, okay, that's a bunch of different pictures of, people's faces. And you pull back a little more, and it's still hard to figure out exactly what the big picture is. There's a bunch of little pictures put together with big pictures, and then finally, you get to see, oh, it's a picture of Jesus. And so it's a picture of Jesus made up of, hundreds of smaller pictures of other people, right? And that was to try and illustrate the idea of what does it mean that the mystery was, the mystery of salvation was hidden, and why was it hidden, And, we talk about in the Old Testament that, for instance, there's the Holy Spirit is throughout the Bible, but you don't really see a lot of the Holy Spirit in the Old Testament. only in the New Testament really comes to light. Same thing with salvation of the Gentiles. Salvation for everyone is in the Old Testament, but you don't see it real clearly until you get to the life, death, and resurrection of Jesus, and then it really becomes clear. And that's what Paul was talking about, that this mystery of Christ was hidden from generations, but now it's clear, and it's my job to tell you about it. And it's like this, when you're so close to something, it's hard to see the big picture, but the further you get away, or the longer you live, a lot of times wisdom comes with experience, which comes with time or age. And so, the longer you live, the bigger picture of life you get. That's why old people are always telling, teenagers, well, when I was your age, and, learn from my mistakes. And, it's kind of cliche, but it's true. And so that's what he's trying to get. And he's trying to get across that the mystery now is that we are all equal, and you're not an afterthought of the Jews. You're not, you don't inherit after the Jews get their inheritance, then you get your inheritance. It's like, no, we are all the same. And that's what chapter 3 mostly is about. And it was interesting because it was like in the Barbie movie, it was a saying. All these discarded Barbies were included in, even though they've been canceled, they were in the movie, which I thought was really cool. They didn't leave anybody out. And, in the end, they were imperfectly, but they were trying to make everybody has a place. Everybody has a purpose. You're not just an accessory. You're not just and kin. I think the word is kin enough. You are kin enough.
Knuff.
Knuff. You are knuff. But we should all get shirts that say knuff. And was kind of what Paul was saying. So I imagine if Paul had seen the Barbie movie, he would use it as an illustration as well. But, Yep.
Mm-hmm. Oh, you aren't going to go any further with that?
Oh, I mean, in Sabbath school we went further. We talked about, we kind of compared the idea of how the Jews felt about the Gentiles. And, it's interesting. You look back on that, and the Jews were, so far removed from Gentile. And Gentile was anybody that wasn't a Jew, and they felt the way they did about them, in that if you, happened to brush shoulders with a Gentile, you were unclean. It was one of these, you were unclean if you did anything with a Gentile. And it was that idea of like, wow, really? I mean, it's another human being, it's another person, and yet you have the perception and the feeling of, if I just rub shoulders, I am unclean by touching this person. And that's really kind of intense. We read about that stuff, but, really, if you think about it, it's like, man, that's pretty hardcore. And then you think, well, how far, and for us to think, well, I'm glad we're not like that anymore. And you think, well, wait a minute, are we that far removed from it? And I talked about, growing up in the South, that even up into the late 80s and early 90s, I could travel around South Carolina and I could find gas stations and stuff that were way out in the hick. It wasn't really much of the main city, but they were still there in the sticks, where they still had, water fountains, and they had, white water fountain, colored water fountain, white bathrooms, colored bathrooms. And, the very real belief and feeling that I can't even drink from a water fountain from, a colored person because, that's gross. And it's really kind of the same thing. And so we're not so ready to say, I'm glad we're not like that, because we still even have, people today we, shun, like the Pharisees and the Jews shun the Gentiles. And one of those was, we talked about, we have 4 kids. We have Randy, Ryan, and Colby. And Colby's married to Autumn, and Ryan's married to a girl, Amanda. Sorry, Amanda. And Randy's married to Brittany. And Randy and Brittany are, both girls. So we were No, it was Aspen. Found this picture. I guess it was Brittany was walking around.
I think Randy and Brittany were probably out for a walk.
Together.
And yeah, they live in Walla Walla.
Yeah, they live in Walla Walla, Washington, home of a big Adventist university. And I guess walking around, people write on sidewalks with chalk. And I don't know if you can, I don't know if I can zoom or not, but yeah. It says, Jesus is king, don't be gay. And then I think they added that thoughtful sidewalk advice, And it was just kind of another reminder, another, picture of, how far are we removed from, putting other people that we don't agree with or we don't understand or we don't, relate to, and putting them on the outside, just like the Pharisees did with the, Gentiles. And here Paul was in prison over the whole point he was trying to make of we're all children of God. There's no one that's any better than the other. And we also talked about, Paul was writing from prison. The reason he was in prison was because of this gospel he was preaching and saying, no, bring them into the temple, bring them in because they are children of God as well. And the Pharisees and the Jews hated that, and so they tried to kill Paul. And he ended up in Rome and he ended up in prison because, of this message. And so that was how we started relating the Barbie movie to Ephesians chapter 3.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I actually, when we knew for several weeks that Brett was going to teach Sabbath school, and when I wrote about Barbie, what we were originally going to talk about this week for Salt, I ended up, I told Brett, I was like, you don't have to include me in participating in teaching Sabbath school. I said, do whatever you want. But then I did find that small section we talked about today, and I said, you know what? If you want to use this, you can. If not, that's fine. So yeah, we actually had a whole different thing planned, but it happened to work like this. So here we are, and it's kind of nice to let Brett do his thing, because
at times.
Yes.
So if you get a chance to see the Barbie movie, it's worth seeing. It's fun, and I don't know if we'll see another movie as a family together or not.
Probably a good long while.
Yeah, there's just not really that. It's hard to find something to go to. That's one thing, and
yes, it is.
To make it worth it to go see, sit in a crowded room that's cold. But and especially with the strike and everything going on, there's probably not going to be anything out for a while. But maybe you'll find something you can recommend. Hey, you guys should go see this.
Yeah, see what fun spiritual analogies we can find out of them.
So there you go. So that was kind of what we wanted to share today. It's taking something from the real world and look how that fits with the Bible and real life.
Yep, and since Brett already had his little slideshow and everything, let's use it.
Yeah. So anyway, hope you're having a good Sabbath and staying cool. It's still above 100 degrees here.
Mm-hmm.
Triple digits.
And the 10-day forecast still has us 100 or above.
Yep.
Yep.
So stay cool.